Welcome, everybody, to the Kona Shane Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, Dr. DrAndyRoark. Guys, I am here with my friend, Dr. Beth Venit today. She is the Chief Veterinary Officer for the AAVSB. Those are the Vet State Boards. And we talk all about license defense and what happens when there's a complaint against your license, whether you are a veterinarian or a credentialed technician. And she runs through it, and she makes it less scary, which is good. That was actually what I wanted. I think there's a lot of unknowns around what it means to have a complaint against your license. And I thought, when I met her, I said, "Could you tell me what really happens? Because I'm not sure I really understand and get it." And anyway, she just walks us through the process, what you can expect, what you should know, and most importantly, how to make sure you don't have complaints against your license. It sounds like some pretty simple advice that was just really reassuring and good to hear. So anyway, guys, she's lovely. I pitched to her my Google review system where if people haven't been to my practice, they shouldn't. Their complaints should not be allowed. Kind of like if you haven't made a purchase, then Google won't let you write a review. I think we should do that for Vet State Boards, but it does not go anywhere. She does not agree, and she tells me why. And so anyway, it's a good episode. I hope you guys will enjoy it. It's comfort food. All right, let's get into this episode.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. DrAndyRoark.
Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Beth Venit. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me, Andy.
It is my pleasure to have you. You and I met in Orlando this year at one of the little functions, the muckety muck things, and I got to talk with you. And it was wonderful. You were such a wonderful, sunshiny spot. It was a great event, but it was really, really wonderful just to bump into you and meet you. And you and I were having that thing where we were talking, and I said, "Oh, that's what you do." And you said, "Yes." And I was like, "I have many questions." And you said, "Well, ask me anything." And I thought, this is great. I said, "I know exactly some things I want to ask you." And I think it'd be a great podcast. So for those people who don't know you, you are the Chief Veterinary Officer with the AAVSB, which is the American Association of Veterinary State Boards. Why don't you talk a little bit? Oh, and you're also a veterinarian and you're a Penn graduate. So why don't you talk a little bit about what the AAVSB just does at a high level in the U.S. and Canada, and kind of how it comes into the lives of unfortunate veterinarians. Maybe not unfortunate veterinarians. For me, it's a scary thing. If you called me, I'd be like, "Oh no." Tell me about the AAVSB.
So, Andy, I'd love to, at the end of this, I'd love to have you not fear the process so much, and actually perhaps have a little bit of appreciation for the state boards, and might, I don't know, dare I say, love them.
I appreciate the state. I do. I believe that they're run by good people who are doing an important service. I just don't want to hear from them at all, ever.
That's true. That's true. Well, so let me tell you about AAVSB first. The AAVSB is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are the bridge between our member jurisdictions in the United States and Canada and the licensees to strengthen the regulatory process. We create programs that make the licensure process more efficient and user-friendly with the ultimate goal of public protection. So we work with our member jurisdictions to provide them expertise and data management solutions. And we work with licensees to help them, give them tools to maintain compliance and manage the requirements of being a licensee. And this applies to both veterinarians and veterinary technicians. And we also work with students. We like to educate them on licensure and the regulatory process because, it's so confusing as a student on what to expect after graduation. So we like to give them ideas about how AAVSB can help them through the life of their license.
Okay. That's a lot. That sounds like a kind of corporate speak.
It is.
Tell me just you and me, like I'm 9 years old. Tell me, I'm a 9-year-old veterinarian. Tell me what the AAVSB does, just in the most simplistic terms, efficiency of licensing and things. I'm like, okay, what is that? What does that mean?
We make it, well, first of all, congratulations on being a 9-year-old veterinarian.
Thanks. I am very precocious.
Doogie Howser. So we make it easy to manage the requirements. We simplify the process. We make it easier to manage the requirements for both licensure and regulation so that everybody can forget about those requirements and then do their jobs.
Gotcha. Good. That's what I like to hear. All right, great. Cool. When we started talking, I was asking you about what it means to get to have a complaint filed against your license with the Vet State Board. And so, I've seen this a number of times in my career. To me, it's still kind of this black box process where you get a letter, possibly delivered by a raven. It has black smoke when you open the envelope that comes out, and it says you have been summoned to defend yourself.
Yeah,
and which is not what it says, but that's what I imagine it saying. And on the day of the event, a carriage drawn by large black stallions pulls up outside your hospital, and you have to get into it, and then you go, and hooded figures weigh judgment upon you, and whether or not you get to continue to practice the profession you love, or whether you are exiled from the community to live in the wilderness by yourself and forage for food. And that's kind of how the process is in my mind. And so if it's different from that, we can just sort of start there and sort of start to unpack what the process, how it is actually different from that, and what I might actually expect.
Yeah, actually, Andy, you have it pretty correct, except you forgot to mention the red burning eyes.
The red burning eyes, yeah.
I blocked this out. And the letter kind of explodes when you open it. So I think the process is scary. I'm going to admit it. As a practitioner, I was scared about the process. Every day I was scared that something that I would do would get me in front of the board. But I'm here to alleviate some concerns. It is a scary process, but it is not everything. It's not as bad as you think it is. So the board follows something called due process, just like we do in our court system. And what the due process is meant to look at the complaint as a whole and see if there is actually a violation.
Okay.
So the very first step, and everything I'm going to say here has a caveat of in most cases. So
sure.
we have, in the United States, we have 52 different jurisdictions. And as you can imagine, there's 52 different ways of doing things, slightly different. So this is a generality.
Sure.
In most cases, so a complaint comes in from a member of the public, a coworker, concerned citizen, whatever. It is the board's job for public protection to review every single complaint. So they have to look at every single complaint that comes in and determine, is this jurisdictional? Is this within our jurisdiction, or is this non-jurisdictional? And non-jurisdictionals are the things that we hate when they get in front of the board. So that includes things like complaints about fees, complaints about wait times, complaints about bedside manner, your business practices, debt collection. All of those are non-jurisdictional. And what that means is, with none of those complaints, was there actually a violation of a rule or regulation? So those are immediately dismissed in most cases. Okay.
So when you say immediately dismissed, is that like the veterinarian doesn't hear that they have happened, or is that like we still go through the process, and when we get to that point of, hey, Dr. Roark, today's the day, and then we look at it and go, oh yeah, this is not. People thought that your T-shirt was too tight and was inappropriate, and that's why you're here. And
that's
so we throw that
question. That's a great question. So in most cases, the veterinarian doesn't know about those complaints.
Okay.
The horses have not been hitched up. The raven has not been summoned. Okay. So
good.
In most cases, but the board still has to review them.
Sure.
So if they look at a complaint and they determine that there is jurisdiction, so there is the potential for a violation, or at least it falls within the rules or regulations of that jurisdiction, then they look at the actual complaint and they review the complaint and they say, they may say, oh, there hasn't been a violation here. It's dismissed. Okay.
Gotcha.
They may look at the complaint and say, you know what, we can't tell from the complaint if there's actually been a violation. So then what they'll do is they'll gather more information. They'll assign an investigator from the state board, and they'll, research the complaint. And that includes looking at the medical records, looking at a statement from the licensee, looking at a statement from the complainant if that was available. So they'll look at all of that information. From there, and usually at this point, the licensee knows that there's a complaint because they're
I would imagine when they start looking at medical records,
right,
like
you're going to know something's up.
Tip your hand, yeah.
So from there, there may be a potential for something called a consent order. And what a consent order is an agreement between the investigating member of the board and the licensee. And the consent order usually is, hey, I realized that I was deficient in my medical record keeping. I agree to a fine and this education, the X number of CE hours to help me improve my medical record keeping. Or, hey, you're right, I did not keep up to date with my CE. I'm going to pay a fine and have to make up the CE and do extra CE on top of it. So consent order is basically, usually it's a one-time offense. It's a minor offense. And you work with the member of the board and the licensee to present this option to the rest of the board. And they have the decision to accept or reject it. Okay. Now, if in the information gathering process, they determine that there is a major violation, or if the board rejects the consent order, then we'll go into a hearing. And that's the nightmare situation that we all worry about and we fear. And this is where, the licensee is called in front of the board. There might be a judge involved. There are lawyers involved. There might be a subject matter expert. So they will have the hearing like Law and Order. It's a hearing. It's probably less dramatic with less dramatic music. And there will be a decision based on all of that. Again, was there a violation or was there not a violation? And then from that violation, they'll determine what the proper course of action is. So it could be still education and paying a fee or a fine. In very rare cases, there's a suspension of license or the license is revoked. So things that may get you a violation for the board, because I talked about the things that are non-jurisdictional. So let's talk about things that may be a violation of the board's rules or regs.
Okay.
Would include things like negligence, substandard care, malpractice, unprofessional conduct, illegal activity, drug diversion. Like all of those are actively bad things.
Like really obviously bad things.
Obviously bad things, but it also can include controlled drug errors. So if you don't know if you're, doing something wonky with your DEA license or another person's CE license, so you're not aware that you're doing something wrong, or you just don't know how to do it correctly, or you don't know how to store your controlled drugs correctly. So that's a violation. CE deficiencies are a violation, and medical record keeping is a violation. Also, in some jurisdictions, impairment, so chemical impairment could be a violation as well.
If you dream of doing team training with your team, getting your people together, getting them on the same page, talking about how you guys work together in your practice, I'd love to help you. You can check out DrAndyRoark.com and check out the store. I have 2 different team training courses. These are courses for teams to do together to get on the same page and to talk about how you do things. I have my Angry Clients course and I have my Exam Room Toolkit course, and they are both available and there. Check them out. All right, guys, let's get back into this episode. So a couple quick questions.
Sure.
So what percentage? I know this probably differs wildly between states, but what percentage of complaints actually end up going to a hearing? Are we talking about 10%? Are we talking about 50%? We're talking about 1%? Kind of what percentage of complaints, if I get a thing that says, hey, there's been a complaint, we're going to investigate. What's the probability that that's going to end up in a hearing? Just kind of big picture.
It's a low percent. I can't say exact percents because it varies by the year and by the jurisdiction. So, but it is a low percent. And part of that is because the public doesn't understand due process. They don't. So a lot of the complaints, the large portion of them are non-jurisdictional. So you have to think about that whole process. But it is a very small number that actually make it all the way through.
Okay. So yeah, it's funny about the public not understanding due process. When you and I met, I asked you, I had my own idea, and I was like, you know how if you write a 1-star review on Google, but you haven't actually been a customer of the business, Google will just remove that review because it stops people from showing up on the internet and bashing you. I was like, I think the state board should have that policy, which means if you have not actually been to the clinic, you are not allowed to file a board complaint. And you did not agree with that and told me that was not how it was done. Can you touch on that, on the reason why that's the case?
Well, it's part of the process. So it's not necessarily, I don't know if that's exactly what I would say now. It's part of the due process for the board to investigate whether or not this complaint is reasonable or not.
Gotcha.
So, if a complaint is anonymous, they have no way of verifying if the person complaining ever had experience, right?
Gotcha.
But I do want to emphasize there is due process. So in complete opposition to Google or Yelp reviews or Yahoo, whatever, there is somebody and a multiple number of people who are reviewing the complaint for, is this worthwhile? Does this make sense? And personally, for me, if I was a veterinarian, I would much prefer a complaint to go to the state board than to have it end up on social media or Google or Yelp.
That's interesting. Yeah, I have to process that a little bit. I see where you're coming from because it will be handled. You'll get a fair hearing, which is not the case. It's on the social medias. Yeah, I see that.
And the problem with social media is that everything kind of snowballs and goes downhill, and it never ends. Right? If it's on Facebook, if it's on Twitter or TikTok or whatever the kids use these days, it never ends. But the process with the board, once you get to the decision, it's over. So, and if they find there's no violation, then there's no public record. So if you are, if there's no violation done, then nobody knows that anything happened, right?
Okay. That makes sense to me. Talk to me a little bit about the similarities and differences between the states. So you said, there's 52. You pull the face. There's 52 different ways to do things. I guess what I'm looking for here is just like, are there areas that are wildly different? I guess this is my own curiosity are there certain things that you go, well, this is an issue on which states seem to vary widely. I guess in my mind, the more mundane things, there's probably, some people say it takes 2 weeks and some people say it makes 6 weeks or, kind of basic things like that. But I'm just curious if there are topics or areas where you say some states are very aggressive in this way and some states are not so much. I'm just interested in what those topics or those areas of divergence would be.
The areas of divergence are endless. Okay. So the thing that is similar is public protection. The way that they go about that is different from every jurisdiction. The process of, due process is similar between one jurisdiction and another, but there's going to be minor differences. The makeup of the board and how, that office operates varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Sometimes in some of the larger states, they have staff members and staff members and staff members. And in other jurisdictions where it's smaller, it might just be the executive director or the ED. There's usually the ED. There's usually some sort of legal representative. It could be someone who is directly on that staff, or it could be the attorney general or the assistant attorney general. and there's always board members. And the board members are veterinarians and veterinary technicians, if they license veterinary technicians. And then there's always a public member, a member of the public who's just Joe Schmo, says, I want to be on the vet board, and they get appointed.
Okay.
So,
I have Thursdays free. I'll be on the board. Yeah, I get it.
You could be on the board, Andy. So it's a volunteer position, and most boards they love their veterinarians because you provide subject matter expertise, and you help with this complaint process. So if this is something that keeps you awake at night, you could volunteer.
You'll be on the board. Well, it's good. It's always good to know what my options are. But yeah. All right. I like it. So that totally makes sense, and that does make it a bit less scary. I like that. What are the sort of general suspension and revocation of licenses? When we talked about it, you were saying it's really rare to get to this point. So can you color in the lines a little bit of like what percent? Oh, actually, I guess how about this? Let's start to look together at kind of how cases kind of break down that generally show up for the AAVSB. So if you had to put them into categories, just big categories of what shows up, where complaints come from, could you do a pie graph for me? It's kind of like this type of complaint tends to be about, 30%. And I'm not asking you, I know you don't have numbers in front of you or anything like that. And I know they'd be sloppy categories, but are there big categories that come in, and kind of how does that break down? And then of those categories, where do we see suspensions or revocations, things like that?
Yeah. Again, revocations, extremely rare. I think a board is more likely to suspend and try to remediate than to revoke. Okay. The biggest category is failures in communication and medical record keeping. Okay. So that is something, because everything else is kind of active wrongdoing, right? You're selling drugs, you're performing malpractice, you're doing illegal activities through your veterinary office.
Right.
So the very most common thing is failures in communication and medical record keeping. And if you think about it from why does this happen, if you think about it, who would be submitting the complaint? It's a member of the public. So what does the public care about? They care about communication. So if for anybody listening, if you're saying, how can I avoid a complaint to the board, I would give you a couple different answers. And this will help with the majority of cases. First of all, don't do anything illegal.
Yep. Good starting point.
Good starting point. General rule of thumb for life. Don't do anything illegal. So putting on my AAVSB hat, I would say practice. First of all, very first thing you should do if you don't want to have a complaint against you for the board, know your jurisdiction's practice act. Know your jurisdiction's regulations, because they vary, especially if you're new to that state or that jurisdiction. Read the regulations. I know it is not the most thrilling information you can get out there. It's not a Tom Clancy novel, but you should read them and understand them, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is stay up to date on your CE. CE violations or failure to complete your CE is so common, and it is something that you can do very easily. And then the third important thing would be your medical record keeping, and then your controlled drugs. So handle those correctly. All right. Now, if I took off my AAVSB hat and put on my Beth hat, I would tell you the key is good communication with your client and compassion towards your client.
Gotcha.
And those are two things that are going to keep the client and you as a partner, and not as them wanting to file a complaint against you.
Gotcha. That totally makes sense. I'll be honest here and say I probably read the state regulations for South Carolina when I applied to get licensed in the state of South Carolina 10 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Is there a portal where it's like here's all of the state regulations, or is it just go through your licensing body where you say this is where I have to keep up my CE? So in South Carolina it's like the LLRC, some of the body and all that sort of, I know all the regulatory stuff is there. Is there another place to go and find those things, or do you just individually seek it out in your state? And then when we say, read the regulations, like what exactly should I hunt down to be the most efficient where I go, okay, I got what I need to get?
Well, I don't know about efficiency because I'm still learning that myself, but I can tell you, if you go to our website, aavsb.org, we have a link to all of the jurisdictions. And from there, you can find your practice acts and your regulations. So
Perfect.
That's an easy way. But I will tell you also, as public agencies, everything is public knowledge. So you should be able to go to your board's website and you should be able to access the regulations, the Practice Act, any guidance documents. All of that would be on the website and it is public knowledge.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Sweet. I will link that in the show notes so everybody can find it for sure. But yeah, that totally makes sense. All right. This sounds very doable. I'm gonna need to draw this podcast to a close so I can go check my CE hours and make sure. I think the licensing period is closing up here before long, and I'm like, I know I'm good, but now I feel compelled to go and look one more time just to make sure that I'm still good. So I am going to do that. It's good to hear that that suspension and revocation is rare. I like to hear that. Is there a ceremony for that? Like I imagine in the old war movies when like the soldiers would have the stripes ripped off their shoulder. Is there something like that, or do you just get another Raven delivered letter? No ceremony.
I wish I could tell you, Andy. I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's probably a secret ceremony, I suspect. That's probably held at midnight, and that's why you're not there. So anyway, I'm going to still hold on to that it's a secret ceremony at midnight, and that's why Beth hasn't been invited. And anyway, so let's hope that we never find out if that's true or not. Guys, thanks so much for being here. Dr. Beth Venit, thank you so much for your time and expertise. Are there any final resources, links, words of wisdom, anything that you want to put out for people before you go?
Yeah, happy to. So if you go to our website, aavsb.org, like I said, you can see the board links to the websites and the statutes. But then you can also check out some of our programs that we have for licensees. So we have our ReachTrack program, so you can track your CE and stay in compliance. We have our Vault program and Vault Premium, which is the secret weapon for anyone who wants to transfer from one jurisdiction to another. If you're moving, definitely check it out. And then we also have links for our VT&E program or tests for technicians who want to become credentialed. And then we have a PAVE Vets and PAVE veterinary technician program for foreign trained veterinarians and veterinary technicians who want to work in the United States. So you could check those out as well.
That's fantastic. Thanks again for being here.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Andy.
And that is our show. That's what I got. Guys, I put some links to the aavsb.org down in the show notes. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks for Beth coming in and talking with me. She's amazing. But guys, take care of yourselves. Write up your records. Do your CE. Communicate with your clients. Those are my takeaways. And that's I'm gonna go check and make sure I have all my CE done for this year. All right, take care, everybody. I'll see you later.